And a good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to round one of the Swarbreak.com Formula Alpha Championship for the second half of 2023. We're here this evening at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. And yeah, it's good to be back. Been a while since we've been in the commentary box, and we've already had our first big incident. There is Colin Knief in the stake liveried car there. Oh, apologies, the Alfa Romeo liveried car. I've already got used to giving it its new name. Colin Knief into the pits there with a bit of a mistake there for myself as well. Alex Smith currently running P3 in this session. We'll go on board with him. And yeah, let's have a bit of a breakdown as to what we can expect this season. First big change, as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, is that fantastic new car. It's certainly going to be a tough one for the drivers to get used to, because now we're in a proper bit of Formula 1 machinery. The Formula RS Hybrid is a fantastic fantastic bit of kit as well. You've got to deal with your MGUH, your MGUK, so many settings to adjust, a full range of tyres on this car as well. Strategic element will be a big part of getting some good race pace out of this car this season. Currently in qualifying though, with 13 minutes to go, and it is Colin Knief. Great to see him returning. Actually, that's another one of the changes. After a little while, you've got Colin Knief back in the car. 1 minute 19.8 so far. He is certainly on the pace as if he never left us. And it's Will Inglis, Alan Matthews actually, who've just had a bit of an incident there. Let's see if we can catch what went on. It looked like it was a worse incident for Will Inglis than it was Alan Matthews, but we should be able to continue on. At least Alan Matthews is, as you can see, most cars, which is what we'd expect, on the C4, C5 tyre. Of course, this is qualifying. That's Alex Smith in the background having a big impact. This car can give up rather easily, as you can see in the very dark liveried car there of Andrew Craker. That is just down to the fact that we haven't quite finished all of the liveries yet. It is a very complicated car to get the liveries done on, and Guy and Paul Millman have been working very hard, very fast indeed, to get the ones done that we have got so far, but still a couple left to go, and they are looking fantastic, if I do say so myself. Let's see. Yeah, there is Alan Matthews. His traditional Auto Italia inspired livery been adapted to this more modern Formula 1 chassis. Likewise, Colin Knief, of course, running in a bit more of a familiar livery, shall we say, from Las Vegas, of course, is the Alfa Romeo car that we will no longer see that name on track, of course, in the world of Formula 1, unfortunately. So you're going to have to come here for all of your Formula 1 Alpha-based shenanigans, if you will. And Colin certainly has had a few shenanigans so far in this session, even though he is leading with a not quite a comfortable margin, but a margin nonetheless. It's 1/10 between him and Andy Craker. Andy Craker, I should mention, absolutely ballistically fast in the Winter Endurance Championship. Of course, none of those events were streamed, but I can confirm there will be a very thorough breakdown coming up in the next issue of Alfa Romeo Drive. You, of course, already had one, and you'll be getting the first one of 2024 in the near future, and that will have a bit more information as to what we were getting up to over winter in our Endurance Championship. And the reason that wasn't streamed is because I was actually busy driving in it as well. For a bit of a change-up, I'll take part in some of the races myself, and apologies to Andy Brammer in the penultimate race of the series, when I did have a slight bit of a bump with you, but apart from that, it was fairly smooth sailing. Yes, all cars on the... actually, we've got a mix of C3, C4 and C5, so a few drivers, the likes of Steve Knight, Rob Whitney, Andy Brammer, opting to maybe go a little bit more conservative in this qualifying session, treat it as perhaps more of an extended practice session. That's certainly useful, as these drivers don't have full familiarity with the car just yet. They're deciding, get on a harder tyre, go a little bit longer into the qualifying session, get a few more laps under your belt. The times will come that way, and you'll get more familiar with the car before the race. A few drivers, of course, opting for the C4 and C5, deciding, no, I need all the tyre grip I can get to go absolutely flat out. Good to see as well, we've got Matt Daly in this session, which means we will have the Matt Daly Colin Knief battles of old going on in this race. Currently, session is Colin Knief, Andy Craker and Alex Smith there. His fastest lap actually was his previous proper qualifying time. Currently on what I thought was a bit of an outlap, although it will actually be a bit of a fly here. I can tell you, slower through the first sector, up on the second sector, but the commentator's curse already, before we even got into the first race. I do apologise, Colin. The commentator's curse in effect there, and bringing an end to this qualifying run. Still 9 minutes to go in this session though, so we still will have plenty of time to get at least, I would have thought, 2 or 3 laps in before the end here. So yeah, so let's have a little bit more of a look into the changes of this car compared to the RSS Supreme, the more kind of Super Formula / Formula 2, Formula 3 inspired car that we were running in the previous season. This is of course full-on F1 machinery. That means a turbo V6 of 1.6 litres along with a big old battery and 160 horsepower of ERS / kind of electrical energy to deploy and play with. And you can adjust that using you can adjust an MGUH mode, so you can choose whether or not, just like real F1, you can choose whether or not to have the car, the MGUH, giving energy back to the battery. You can choose whether or not to put that power to the wheels, of course. If you put it to the wheels, you're going to lose energy charge, but you will be a lot quicker. The MGUK, you have a range of modes there. Basically, kind of think of it like brake regeneration, like KERS. And we also have, as is in Formula 1, the DRS system. So instead of push to pass that we had on the RSS Supreme, we go to the what is now familiar drag reduction system on the rear wing. So you press a button on the steering wheel in DRS zone and the wing opens up and you can go that little bit faster. That is our push to pass for this season. And one key difference between Formula 1 and the series we are running here is that you do not have to be within 1 second of the nearest car in order to use that. So everyone in the DRS zone does have the advantage of that drag reduction. Of course, slipstream only comes to those who are chasing a car in front, but DRS is available to everyone as long as you remember to use it. I think at least early on in the season we're going to have quite a few cars forgetting to use it, and that will certainly add a little bit of excitement into the races. I should mention, of course, Alex Smith has just put in a very nice lap indeed there, 119.7. So we're going to be looking at, I suspect, mid-119s, maybe low if we're lucky, by the end of this qualifying session in order to get on pole. Let's have a look at what was going on elsewhere in the field. It's Will Inglis back out on track. Will Inglis, of course, very impressive last season. Currently P6 in the running in this session. So 3rd row on the cards here for Will Inglis. I can tell you we do have 18 or 19 cars, I believe, signed up for this season's running. In fact, I might be wrong on that number there, so perhaps don't quite quote me on that one. But still some good turnout so far this evening. I was, in fact, spot on the money. It was 18 cars exactly. I don't know why I doubted myself. There is Alan Matthews just in front of Jack Hodson there. Jack Hodson we saw earlier on having a slightly less than ideal start to this session. A few errors creeping in, but he seems to be now a little bit more comfortable with that car and is now pushing a little bit harder. Now P7 with a 122.5. There is a big gap between the top 3 who seem to be fairly dialed in with the car and those about 1.2, 1.3 seconds down in the mid-pack who aren't quite comfortable. It's like looking at 24 when the 2014, sorry, when the cars first, when the hybrid Formula 1 cars first came in into Formula 1. A big gap between the front runners and those in the mid-pack. That gap, I suspect, will shrink down not only in this session but as the season goes on as well. The likes of Matt Daly, we suspect, just not quite comfortable with the car yet, but very quick, we know that for sure. As you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, or you could at least briefly, thank you game, I'll take control back away from you. We have the predicted lap time there, and as you can see, it's looking a fairly consistent time for Matt Daly. Now that could be down to just not quite confident with the car just yet. Could also be down to various other factors as well, like what tyres he's running. Well, he's running the C4 tyre. That seems to be the ideal tyre if you look at what everyone else is running. Kneef, Craker, Matthews, all on the C4 tyre as well. So that seems to be the tyre of choice for this qualifying session. It's a tyre that doesn't give up too much by the end of the lap here at Catalonia. But maybe something going on with the DRS deployment, maybe not using the DRS in the most ideal fashion. Let's see as he goes later into his session if he can pick up another second or so. Great sound from that car on board as we see him now heading down into the second sector. This corner coming up now turn 7, turn 8, one of the most crucial parts of the lap. You can make so much time if you absolutely nail the line here. I'm not quite sure if Matt Daly was able to. The back end looked a little bit unsettled here. This is a great camera angle. And now the back straight, the run down towards turn 10, the second highest speed part of the track for a heavy braking zone now. And again, another crucial part of the track. Turn 12, it is so easy to push wide through this right-hander. And then turn 13 is a lot easier than what it used to be. Of course, no more chicane there. Although we appear to be running that variant, so we are running a chicane layout. But unfortunately for Matt, his biggest concern won't be the track, it will be Paul Millman, who was in the way there. Not sure if he was on his own quali lap or if that was a little bit of impeding going on. Either way, that has brought a bit of an end to Matt Daly's qualifying run. That's a shame, as it would have been an improvement as well. But that is a disaster for Matt Daly here in qualifying. And he's back out of the pits immediately, of course. The car automatically refuels when he goes back into the pits. There is Will Inglis up in front of him as well. Will Inglis is about 3 positions down, but that is only 2/10. So he is very much a rival for Matt Daly so far in this session. In fact, we have a bit of a mid-pack battle hotting up already. Alex Smith then looking quietly confident, I suspect, so far with that 1:19.7. He leads by just over 1/10 of a second. Paul Brady rejoins the session, or rather joins the session. Let's see what he can do in this race. Oh, sorry, in this qualifying session at least. As that is not the most helpful camera angle in the world now, is it? That is... I've seen more friendly camera angles. It doesn't show us too much. But I suspect that is a pit lane angle there. We go on board with Andy Craker in that rather ominous looking in that Formula Alfa car there. That is, I suspect, the ultimate lightweighting package on the car there. Of course, Alfa out of the blocks in terms of the ground effect here, or at least were the lightest car on track. So maybe he's just making sure that we still hold that crown, and he certainly has with that lap time. That I didn't quite see that one coming there, but that was a 1:19.1 for Andy Craker. He was absolutely, as I said, absolutely ballistic in the Winter Endurance Championship, and there is confirmation of his speed there. A 1:19.1 sees him over half a second ahead of the rest of the pack. You have to wonder now whether or not the others will be able to keep up with him, be able to rival him with that type of speed. As we go on board with Steve Knight now. Of course, Steve Knight synonymous with the purple/blue livery cars. He hasn't quite got his own sorted out just yet with the correct sponsors, the correct livery, but he's at least in the correct colour as we back on board with him now. Currently running in P10, so ahead of Paul Millman and Guy Swarbrick here as it stands. Apologies, not quite ahead of Guy Swarbrick. Guy Swarbrick has departed from the session, decided that 1:23.1 is all he can do at this stage. I imagine he's got plenty of admin to sort with this series as well before the race gets underway. Will Inglis currently not improving from that P7. I think this car has been a bit of a wake-up call for a few drivers, a bit of a shock to the system, if you will. Now, we did, of course, later on towards the end of 2023 run the RSS Hybrid in a few races as part of our Sunday Fun Race Championship. They're not streamed, they're just kind of a casual event to maybe test out some new features with tracks, maybe Assetto mods and cars as well. And that was our first use of the RSS Hybrid. And our first track, if I'm not mistaken, because I was taking part in it, so you'd hope I'd remember, was Las Vegas. Las Vegas was a great demonstration of this car, or at least I thought. And I think a few drivers still not quite fully getting to grips with this car just yet, but it is a fantastic challenge. So if you're looking to get involved, certainly do. If you are part of the AROC forums already, you'll see Guy Swarbrick's posts. He is a man to get in touch with, as well as getting on board with our website, aroc2.emperorservers.com. That has a bit more info about the car, about the tracks as well, about the championships that we run. That's aroc2.emperorservers.com. There you can also follow along with live timing for this series and see what the cars are doing on track as I can. Now, let's have a look at what the cars are doing on track at the end of this qualifying session. The timer has hit 0. It's Andy Craker with that fantastic 119.1 coming across the line next. It will be Colin Knief, one of his rivals in this session. His last attempt now for a fast one. Ignore that predicted time. Let's hope he's not setting a 53-minute lap. He heads round turn 14. That final corner, tyres are searing hot, and it's a 119.7. So it's an improvement for Colin Knief. It's just not enough, unfortunately, for him for a pole position in this first race. Next cross line will be Will Inglis, and he promotes himself up into P6. So he's found 3/10 there. That's a decent improvement for Will Inglis. Next we have then, it will be Steve Knight. Steve Knight coming across the line remains in P10 with a 123.9. Next it will be Alan Matthews, and in fact one of 2 cars remaining out on track. It will be Alan Matthews as he weaves across the line there, deciding I think that was not an improvement to be found from that lap, and he stays in 5th with 121.19 there. Then we have Alex Smith next across the line. He didn't improve on that lap and remains 119.1. Jack Hodson then is our remaining car, and he also doesn't improve. So a bit of a diminuendo at the end of qualifying there, but it is Andy Craker with that fantastic pole lap. He lines up at the first spot on the first row of the grid. Alex Smith just behind him in P2. Second row, Colin Knief, Matt Daly. Then you have Alan Matthews, Will Inglis, Jack Hodson, Andy Brammer, Guy Swarbrick, Rob Whitney, Steve Knight, Paul Millman, and Paul Brady rounding out the running. He wasn't able to set a lap in the end, but we'll join you in just a few minutes for our first lap of our first race of the first round. So many firsts of this series of the 2024, because it's just occurred to me I've been saying second half of 2023, and I've also put 2023 on the stream, so I'll rectify that and catch you in a few minutes for race 1. Business as usual here, clearly. On the grid then, for the first time this year, and we are ready for some racing action here at Catalunya. Of course, running the more traditional layout with the chicane towards the end, so that is something to note. And there we have Andy Craker, Alex Smith, Colin Keneath and Matt Daly. And Alan Matthews are top 5 on the grid here because you can only see 5 from that fantastic camera angle there. And it is just under a minute to go now. So, as we head into the race scenario, if you will, a few things to change on the cars. So, drivers will be looking to have a little bit of a more kind of comfortable kind of ERS mode there, one that preserves the battery life a little bit better so they don't run out and have a massive straight line deficit. Also, the tyres, they'll be going for a bit of a harder tyre, of course. We're nowhere near as long as a real F1 race, so we don't need to make multiple pit stops, but the drivers are, for the majority, running the C2 tyre, so that's kind of your harder compound tyre. Not the hardest, we have 6, of course, now in 2024 F1. But a mixture of the C4, C3 and C2. Jack Hodson on that C4 there will, as will Alan Matthews, be fast, but maybe a little bit slow later on. It is 6 red lights on the gantry, and we are away. Those engines roaring as we get ready to go away, and that is a big off there for Colin Keneath and Matt Daly. I think Colin Keneath just couldn't quite get the launch right, ended up spearing towards the barrier and into the wall there. What a shame. His first ever race start, a bit of a disaster. Also a disaster for Matt Daly, who got caught up in that incident as well. Other incidents, Willie Bliss and Alan Matthews, they have their own bit of a collision heading into turn 1, so we're underway now, and it is now Alex Smith, Andy Craker and Andrew Brammer. Apologies, that is not Andrew Brammer, that is Paul Brady. I am mistaken there. Apologies for that one. It is Paul Brady up into P3 with Willingless very hot on his heels just behind there. As we see, let's go on board with Alex Smith as Rob Whitney and Guy Swarbrick have their own little collision further down the field. That wasn't too bad at all. It was only about 10 kilometres an hour, which is nothing in these cars, of course. As we see a very brave move by Andy Craig there, and that was only going to end one way. I just think he had a little bit more speed coming through turn 7, turn 8 and into turn 9. Tried to find somewhere where he could go around there, and the back end on this car is very unforgiving indeed. And I think he saw him, the car just, as he rode over the curb, just went, no, I'm not having any of this, and careened itself straight into the barriers. It appears, though, Alex Smith, well, I believe is currently running a steering wheel, not a PS5 controller for once, albeit by his own words, not the nicest steering wheel in the world. Is doing a very nice job of it. He's got clear of all of the collisions and incidents earlier on in this race, as, you know, people are raring to go. We're in a new car as well, not quite familiar with that. And well, as you can see, we've had chaos on the start here. Matt Daly still all the way down in P8, heading into that first corner now. It is position change aplenty for a few cars now. Matt Daly up into P8, Guy Swarbrick just staying back in P9 there. Actually, Guy Swarbrick's livery transfers very nicely indeed onto the RSS Hybrid, it must be said. Meanwhile, it is Andy Brammer. This is definitely Andy Brammer in the blue livery car now, and Colin Keneath. Colin Keneath in the Vegas F1 livery there, as he now heads through turn 5 and is up back into P5 as well, which is very nice for him. So a disappointing start, but a good recovery so far. As we see, it's Alan Matthews and Matt Daly. These two certainly know how to battle. They've battled in the past before in our touring car and single-seater series, as they head now down towards turn 10. Our next big overtaking opportunity, our next big braking zone, where it is ideal to try and get past another car here into Sector 3 now as we go. And it all looked fairly clean. They're a little bit wide for Guy Swarbrick by the looks of things, but nothing too much to complain about, really. Alex Smith, meanwhile, still that 1.7, 1.8 second margin to the car behind. It should be said, currently in terms of outright pace, it looks to be that Paul Brady is doing a mighty impressive job in keeping up with him, not only keeping up with him, but ever so slightly eclipsing him as well. A 1:22.7 on that last lap, his best lap of the race so far. Meanwhile, Alex Smith, 22.8, so very close, but still very fast indeed. It should also be mentioned that Alex Smith has managed to get that lap in, only 1/10 of a second slower, while on a harder compound of tyre. You can see there on your timing tower, the C2, C3, C4, the numbers there corresponding to the tyre compounds, and it is Alex Smith who is on the harder compound of tyre. No one on the C1 or C0, it's probably not necessary. And yeah, that is a good lap from Alex Smith on that harder compound of tyre with a full load of fuel as well to keep the likes of Paul Brady at bay. Now, as expected, Jack Hodson at the start of this race, absolutely electric on those C4 tyres. Is he trying to kind of cash in his advantage now? That's what I'd be doing if I was in this position. I'm not sure if he meant to go on the C4s or if he has forgotten. We can't rule that out. As you can see him harvesting a little bit of energy there. You can see the blinking on top of the air intake indicating that. And yeah, that's... C4 tyre is going to be brave. 5 minutes in, I'm sure it's still feeling fairly competitive right now, and you can see the car is turning in nicely through that chicane. If there's one criticism I have, not just of this mod, it's not of this mod really, it's of the ground effect era cars in general. They are very big and they are very heavy, and when you go through some of the tighter stuff like that chicane there, it can feel like a Dennis Dart bus more than a Formula 1 car, yeah, that car still seemed to hook in rather nicely there, so I expect the C4 tyre, the soft compound tyre, doing him a few favours here. Now, he's got to try and keep Willingliss at bay and try and build up a big enough margin to Willingliss, in fact, so that later on in the race, when he will be struggling with the tyres, he has enough margin to kind of manage his pace without letting Willingliss past. Of course, this circuit, as you can see, a big puff of smoke, I suspect, from a lock-up earlier on there. I expect heading through turn 5, that can be a bit of a... Oh dear, the back end stepping out for Jack Hodson. Doesn't want to do that too much because he will cook his tyres fairly comprehensively there. Alan Matthews actually seems to have tumbled down the order as well. Also on the C4 competitor tyres, those two both on the C4. I wonder if they're already starting to get a bit hot. Maybe we are starting to see car become a little bit less comfortable to drive. It's one of those circuits where it does put a lot of energy through the tyres. There's a few high-speed corners, the likes of turn 3, turn 12, turn 13, turn 14, turn 9, are all going to be working that front left tyre super hard. That is Paul Brady. He's had a big off there and has dropped a couple of positions as a result. That promotes Jack Hodson up into P2. That turns the stakes. Hang on. Oh, he's not at the right angle. But you see what joke I was trying to make. That turns the stakes up a little bit more, but that is a fantastic overtaking opportunity by by Colin Knief, rather. The deliveries are very similar. By Colin Knief, and he certainly did capitalise on it as well. Great overtake there from him up into P5 now. But yeah, the stakes for... Oh, it worked there to see. Stake! The stakes for Jack Hodson have risen somewhat now. He's got Willingliss hot on his heels, about 1.5 seconds behind, but... he's up in P2. This could be a great start to his championship. I fear for him, though. I really do wonder if those soft compound tyres are going to hold. I suspect not. What a shame for Andy Craker. He certainly did the job that he needed to do in qualifying, and unfortunately just at the wrong moment, just cracked under the pressure, I think, and has dropped back all the way down to P13 as a result of that. Just a oh! The rapture's occurring. Someone go to Barcelona and check if Barcelona's okay, because I don't think it is. Anyway, it is Steve Knight up into P11 now. Alan Matthews down in P12 there. It looks like he's had his own incident, and that is a bit of a shame for him. You can see there Alex Smith using a very wide line on entry into turn 1 there. Just watching that rear wing collapse back into its regular position under braking as he stops using that DRS there. As we see Colin Knief up into P4 now. He's side by side with Paul Brady. The back end gets away from him and he's in a wall there. That was actually contact with Paul Brady there. I suspect either Paul Brady washed out a little bit wider than he anticipated, or he just wasn't able to see Paul Brady in his rearview mirrors there. Either way, down in P8 for Colin Knief. And that is a terrible shame. Not the way you want to start his series. And look at that, utter disaster continuing on. And he retires from the session as well. What a shame. It has gone so wrong for him. And yeah, that is a complete and utter disaster. That meanwhile, in all of this, Jack Hodson has dropped down by about 7 seconds. I'm not sure what's happened there. Willingliss dropped down as well. And that gives Alex Smith a very comfortable lead in this race so far. Oh dear, that's Matt Daly as well. Matt Daly actually having a big off heading through the third corner there. He is able to carry on, but has lost a position down into P6 now for Matt Daly. As we go back on board with Guy Swarbrick now, he's up into P9. And this race seems to have really turned on its head all of a sudden. We're only 10 minutes in, so not quite halfway just yet. But we're going to go on board with Jack Hodson. Jack Hodson now looking in an even better position. I think, if you're listening, Jack, and maybe you are, I'm going to give you some totally not in the spirit of things advice here. I think if you're in this position now, if I was in his shoes, I would back off a little bit. Try and keep Willingless out of the slipstream if he can. Of course, there he is using the DRS, as is, I suspect, good. And we've got a lot of people using the DRS actually good. That is always good to verify. I suppose I'm forgetting, of course, these guys have been trained on the push-to-pass system of the previous car. So basically, DRS is sort of like that push-to-pass system for them, really, but they're allowed to use it constantly whenever they're in a DRS zone. So that's a nice change for them. But yeah, if I was Jack Hodson right now, I'd be inclined to slow down a little bit almost. Try and save those tyres for at least a few laps and have a little bit more energy in them later on into the race if possible. We saw that's Paul Brady actually. Paul Brady having a big off there. A few drivers suffering with the rear end of the car at this race. We did hear kind of murmurs of that, especially from Colin Knief, who, of course, we have to trust. 750MC certainly knows how to drive a car and did not seem very keen. I said it suited my driving style purely because my driving style is terrible and is not fast at all. I just like sliding a car around I'm nowhere near. I've been nowhere near competitive in one of these cars, but yeah, Colin was complaining, and I think we're seeing certainly the effects of that now. We've got a full grid of them going at full pelt around a racetrack, and not a street circuit like Las Vegas. We're seeing this. The back end is certainly different to the nice, grippy and comfortable RSS Supreme that we had in the previous season. That was a bit of a well-loved car, that one, for good reason as well. It's a very nice driving car. Meanwhile, Alex Smith has built his margin up to a now staggering 11 seconds with only halfway race distance completed. Let's have a look at the pace. In terms of pace, then, it's 23.1 for Alex Smith, 24.8 for Jack Hodson, and then Andy Brammer, Matt Daly, Rob Whitney are in the 23. That's quite interesting, actually. We're potentially seeing the likes of Jack Hodson, of course. We understand why he might be losing a bit of pace at this stage, but Willingless as well in the 24s. So what I'm seeing here is that Jack Hodson, as we see Alan Matthews and Andy Craker having a big shunt. Andy Craker further down the order once again. Paul Brady dropping positions as well. And Alan Matthews now down in P12. A complete disaster for him. Andy Craker, Alan Matthews and Colin Knief, the biggest kind of losers, if you will, in this race so far. This is certainly going to make it interesting for the reverse grid race coming up in just a little while. Hopefully we have Colin back for that one. As we jump back in with Jack Hodson on that deal. I nearly said push the pass system there. It has become muscle memory, as it has for the drivers as well. But I suspect what we're seeing here is Jack Hodson is not exactly as quick as he once was. 23.1 was his previous best lap. But perhaps importantly for him, he is quick enough to be enough of a problem for Willingless. So Willingless is going to have to really push if he wants to try and get past. So he isn't able to do so just yet. And these two, of course, had a bit of a squabble a few laps ago. Have certainly been pressuring each other, and that has forced them to use their tyres a little bit harder, has forced them to stay in this battle, and that has meant that the midfield runners behind have now got a decent amount of pace underneath them. So I expect at least Matt Daly in the next 3 or 4 laps to be hot on their heels and start pushing them for position here. So it could be a decent recovery here for Matt Daly as we go later into the race. Rob Whitney, this has been a really good race actually for Rob Whitney. he was another driver who was a little bit apprehensive about the new car at first by the looks of things, but now seems to be very comfortable indeed. Has some pressure now from Paul Brady. Paul Brady out of position, of course, but he is looking to get past both drivers here on the C3 tyre, as we head now into the final part of the lap. On board with Paul Millman here. Paul Millman actually having a good race of it, all things considered. That is Will Inglis, actually. He is a big benefactor from all of the chaos of the start of this race. I thought, his qualifying position wasn't quite, where we perhaps thought it could have been, but he's now up into P3. He's going to have pressure from Matt Daly, as I've mentioned, but still things looking rather good for him. To go back on board with this battle between Rob Whitney and Paul Brady, and heading in to turn 4. Textbook move there by Paul Brady, nicely done. The door was left open for him, he took the opportunity, and up into P5 for Paul Brady. Next is Andy Brammer, could be involved in this mix as well, so we'll see what happens with this one. Everyone in the midfield on the C3 tyre, that's a tyre I think I would probably go for, not that I am by any means whatsoever an expert. In fact, I say I'd probably go for that. I'd go for that if I wasn't the tyre munching killer that I am. You'll find more about it in the next issue from our driver, but there are certain races in the Winter Endurance Challenge where I'm not made for endurance driving, as it turns out. As we see Matt Daly getting ahead of Will Inglis, and that is why, heading into turn 13, he's had a bit of a disaster, and is now still pirouetting around, as he now has to wait, unfortunately, to rejoin the track safely. Is able to do so. I'm not quite sure why he's backing up just yet. Maybe to get a clearer image. But the commentator's curse, once again, is in full effect. I am so sorry, Will. I did it to Colin before. I've done it to Will now. Down in P7 after all of that. That now promotes Matt Daly up into P3. And I am sure our previous last year's champion is going to want to defend that championship, and is going to try and put the pressure on Jack Hodson as we go later into this race. It doesn't have to be too much later as well by the looks of things. There's a gap, a pace delta, if you will, of 1.2 seconds between these two cars at this current time. In terms of their best pace, they are neck and neck. That is for one very good reason. Jack Hodson's on the soft tyre, and Matt Daly is very much on the hard tyre on that C2. And I think the C2 is certainly looking like it's going to be the tyre of choice. As you can see, Alex Smith and Matt Daly currently topping the field there. We're also seeing a few drivers on the C2 at the bottom end of the field, quite interestingly. It's almost it takes me back to the days of 2005 Formula 1. We had the differing tyre runners, where it was Ferrari and then all the other rubbish teams running running one tyre, and it's almost like we're having kind of another version of that. We've got everyone at the bottom on the C2 and then everyone at the top on the C2. So yeah, that difference between the C4 and the C2 is going to be obviously not playing into Matt Daly's favour early on in the race, but they have near enough matched in terms of best lap pace. But as we get later into the race, Jack Hodson's going to start creeping more towards the 21 minute 25 zone, and Matt Daly's going to be comfortably in the 23s on that C2. Very hard tyre, should do him well late on into the race. I think it'll be interesting to see as we head into the reverse grid race coming up just after this one, how many changes of tyre compound we see later into the second race. So don't go anywhere for that one. The entire grid is flipped. Apologies, no, the top 8 are completely flipped in their order, and we get to enjoy an even more exciting race and potentially some different tyre strategies as well. 3 seconds currently separating these two cars, and that seems to be kind of the given margin between cars in this race at this point in time. Andy Craker just ahead of Guy Swarbrick, and very much on a recovery drive at this stage. Meanwhile, we haven't looked at him in a little while. It is Alex Smith. Alex Smith just heading into that first corner now. I don't think he bothered with DRS that time round. Not that he really needs to. He has absolutely nailed it. He is one of 2 drivers currently in the 22s, the other being Andy Craker, so what a shame his race has panned out the way that it has, because that would have been an exciting battle from the front end there. But Alex Smith, our only front runner at the moment in the 22s, he is utterly in charge of this race. And of course, we look back to a few seasons ago. He wasn't able to attend too much last season, but we look back to a few seasons ago where I said Alex Smith is clearly one of our fastest drivers, and on his day is the fastest. It just, the race weekends never string together. Over time, we're starting to see more and more glimpses of it actually properly coming together for him. And what I really hope in this season, and this is a fantastic way to start it, is that, yeah, this could be the season. Not that I want to put a massive commentator's curse on it right at race 1, but I suspect that, you know, in a car that Alex has been, you know, in the paddock has been, you know, there's been murmurs of, you know, confidence, I'd say, in this car. He seems to really gel with it, seems to really understand the ins and outs, the intricacies of it, seems to really understand how it works. I think, you know, I'm of course, I'm not backing anyone. I'm completely unbiased in my commentary position, but I think it'd be very nice to see a good good season from Alex Smith here. As we see Andy Craker up into P8 now, just ahead of Paul Millman, about 0.8 of a second separating them already. So clearly Andy got a lot more pace in his car at this point in time. That C2 tyre working wonders, I suspect, once again. We could see a few more on the harder compound tyre, starting to slowly close that gap to the midfield here. Speaking of closing a gap, haven't quite seen the pace I was expecting from Matt Daly. He's certainly closer this time around, actually. Was a little bit more confident into turn 1 at the start of this lap. We'll have confirmation once they come across the next timing line, if we can compare the deltas through this sector. It was only 0.2 of a second, actually. But, yeah, Matt Daly not quite catching up to Jack Cotton at the pace I would have expected. He's certainly there with him now. The gap is now only 1 second. So we get ready for a battle, but still, it's taken a little bit longer than perhaps I would have thought so. But let's see now what these two can do in the final stages of race 1 here at Catalonia. As we head through turn 9, already weaving occurring as we're on the DRS. Both cars using that DRS then, and heavy braking zone now of turn 10. As we see Matt Daly preparing to take a slightly tighter line there, trying to take the inside. Of course, that does give him the outside line for turn 11, but it does give him the inside once again for turn 12, and that is a fantastic move, actually kind of getting under his skin a little bit. Matt Daly able to pressure Jack Hodson into a bit of an error onto the entry towards the chicane, turn 13 there, and up into P2 for Matt Daly. Just a nice, solid bit of pace, solid bit of driving from Matt Daly as well. Andy Craker and Willing Gliss, meanwhile, apparently having contact there, and this is a sight that we didn't want to see. It's the two dark cars there, the two blacked out RSS hybrids, two fallen heroes as well. Very much higher up in this race at one point, and dropping back as this race just hasn't worked out the way that they would have wanted. Great pace in these cars, especially in Andy Craker's, the number 73 car there, but in fact, no, number 9 car. Apologies, don't know where on earth I got 73 from. It was in front of me, as you can see, but I just made up a number. Anyway, Willing Gliss and Andy Craker then are two cars that are very much out of position. Let's see how they benefit from that, though, in the reverse grid race. They are these two last cars that will actually have their order reversed on the grid for the reverse grid race, so they will be on the front row, and I'm sure will be getting ready for a pretty nice battle. Rob Whitney currently in P6. He's had a good race here, a nice solid start to his championship. Paul Brady up into P3, got ahead of Jack Cotton, I think now. He's done a mighty job of making them last this long, it must be said. And now we're starting to see that C4 drop off. That last lap, a 26.7. He's going to have to worry about the likes of Andy Brammer towards the end of this race. Maybe Rob Whitney too if anything happens, but certainly Andy Brammer. There has been contact between Andy Craker and Rob Whitney. That looks to be a fairly decent impact as well, as Andy Craker was off track for a little while. That allows Willing Gliss to breathe easy, but certainly not ideal for Andy Craker. I suspect Andy got past Will and was looking to try and get past Rob as well. I'm not sure what happened there, but either way, back down into P8. Meanwhile, it is Andy Brammer up into P5 now. Sorry, P4 now, and there we are, yeah. If he's not too careful, soon Jack Hodson will be dropping back even further. That tyre has completely fallen off a cliff, as, you know, we've become accustomed to with these most recent Formula 1 tyres. They really do just fall off a cliff when you start to die, and we're seeing the effects of that now. mentioned, 1 minute to go in this race now, and it is a 25-second margin down to P2. Matt Daly's had a very good race to recover all the way to P2, but it's not quite as good as what Alex Smith's been able to do. A fantastic drive from him. Got away of all carnage, early on, and since then has been able to settle in. Of course, no damage on his car as a result as well. These cars, even more so than the RSS Supreme, susceptible to some aero damage. And yeah, it's just been able to plod along without too much trouble, really, and it has been rewarded for it. Let's see how he fares in the reverse grid race. We've seen what he can do with a clear bit of running. It's certainly very fast indeed. Let's see now. It's a completely different environment, trying to work your way out through 7 positions in a little bit more heat in the reverse grid race. We've actually got the pack closing up a little bit now, as we're starting to see the drivers either find a bit of pace in the car or lose a bit of pace late on. There is Jack Hodson now very much under pressure from Rob Whitney. I suspected this could have happened, and now it will as we start what should be the final lap of this race. In fact, it will be the final lap of this race for Alex Smith, as he has some traffic to negotiate. That is Alan Matthews and Guy Swarbrick that he's looking to try and get past. But let's see what's going on in this battle then. It is Jack Hodson losing out as he exits turn 9, 3 wide, running down towards turn 10. Rob Whitney thought he might have had the position, but no, it's going to be Andy Craig with a fantastic move around the outside, late on the brakes, and got it up into P5. What a brilliant recovery for Andy Craig. Where's this come from all of a sudden? A stellar drive, given that he was plumb last not too long ago, and clear about 20 seconds. Yeah, it was P1 to P11 was 20 seconds, and then it was another 20 seconds down to P12, and he now finds himself up in P5. This is a brilliant recovery for Andy Craker. A bit of a late comeback, really. All of a sudden, driver of the race, you start to question whether it can go to Alex Smith or whether Andy Craker has just been utterly fantastic. Either way, we head now towards the end of the final lap of this race. Through Sector 3, Willinglis gets ahead of Jack Hodson as well. What a fall down through the order for Jack Hodson. Again, just as it was going to be Willinglis and Andy Craker on the front row, it now very much is going to be Jack Hodson on the front row, if he can maintain this position. That's not what we're worried, though. We're worried about the man who did start on the front row and heads through that final corner for one last time in Race 1. A brilliant drive for Alex Smith, who crosses the line and takes the Race 1 victory. Congratulations, Alex. The first race of this season goes to Alex Smith. Not to be forgotten, of course, a brilliant recovery for Matt Daly. That lap 1, very start of the race incident involving him and Colin Knief, but he comes across the line, weaving as he does so to take P2. A great drive from him as well. Next, it will be Paul Brady. Paul Brady certainly wasn't easy for him. Certainly caught up in a few incidents there, but comes through that final corner once again. And will be coming home to take P3. Rounding out the podium there, it is Paul Brady. Just behind him, Andrew Bramath. Again, fantastic working his way up through the field there and into P4. Guy Swarbrick, Alan Matthews having another collision. And then we have Andy Craker rounding out the top 5 with a brilliant drive up into P5 in the end after a calamitous start. Rob Whitney, great drive from him as well. Solid race, P6 in the end. Willinglis, unfortunately, a disaster race for him. He qualified around there, worked his way up towards P2, and then fell back down. Still, decent points on the board there. Jack Hodson, again, what a shame. Worked his way up with a fantastically bold tyre strategy up into P8, but finishes, up into P2, but finishes P8 in the end. Paul Millman finishes P9. Then we have Steve Knight coming across the line there in P10. Alan Matthews will be going P11, just ahead of Guy Swarbrick, rounding out the field there. So that was certainly an eventful start to this season, and we'll catch you in just a few minutes for the reverse grid race coming up here at Catalonia, so don't go anywhere. And welcome back to the action, ladies and gentlemen. Just over 30 seconds ago now until lights out. And here is the order. It is Rob Whitney, Andy Craker on the front row, Andrew Brammer, Paul Brady on the second, Matt Daly, Alex Smith on the third, Jack Hodson, Paul Millman on the fourth, Steve Knight, Alan Matthews on the fifth, Guy Swarbrick, Colin Knief, and Will Inglis rounding out the running then for this next race. I'm hearing myself. That's very interesting indeed. Glad we solved that issue. But just only 11 seconds now until a light out for this reverse grid race. We do, but looks things have a few changes in terms of a tyre compound. So let's get ready then. 6 red lights on the gantry. And we are away. The engines singing once again here at Catalunya for 25 more minutes this evening. As we run down towards that first corner, it is near enough 4 wide heading into the first corner. Actually, a little bit of contact between pretty much all of the cars, actually, as we head into that first corner. But we do get through that first corner, actually, relatively unscathed, all things considered. I don't think anyone... No, everyone making it through there. That is fantastic news. As we see, it is Will Inglis up into P1 here. I believe actually Rob Whitney did have a bit of a disastrous start to this race, as has Paul Brady. Paul Brady dropping back all the way down. I believe that was contact with Andy Craker. It was Paul Brady losing his front wing, Andy Craker losing his rear wing, and that is not ideal for him. And also not an ideal start for Colin Knief in P10 at the moment. Of course, he DNF'd from the previous race, which means that he doesn't get the opportunity to have a higher grid position for the second. And that is a disaster for him. And also a big disaster for Jack Hodson there. He had swapped onto the C2 tyre to try and not have a repeat of what happened in the first race. And there is Alex Smith as well. And that is a shame. Our race 1 winner currently down in 9th here, as he has big contact with Paul Millman. That was now has no front wing. Paul Millman has no aero at all on the car. Really, his floor might be doing a little bit of work for him, but his front and rear wing completely and utterly toast. And this has made things a little bit more comfortable for Will Inglis out in front there. Nearly a collision between Guy Swarbrick and Andy Brammer there. Colin Knief, meanwhile, is up into P5. He's been able to capitalise on a few mistakes up in front of him. And we now jump back into the action as we hope it settles down at least a little bit for the sake of the drivers and the cars here, as Guy Swarbrick loses their position through the second corner, as does Steve Knight, as does what has happened there with Andy Brammer. Can we go on board with him? No, I don't think we can for whatever reason. Where is he? There he is. It's Andy Brammer. We were on board with him. He's on the exit of turn 2, looking like he's going to have a lot of work to do in this race. Matt Daly, meanwhile, in P5. Colin Knief up into P4. I'll try that again. Alex Smith has made a bit of a recovery here. Is going to be very much in the mix, which is what we like to see. We have all of a sudden a very interesting battle building up here, as we have a few cars who are rather quick, it must be said, in the midfield. We've got the likes of Colin Knief, Matt Daly, Alex Smith occupying P4 down to P6. We don't count on Paul Brady either. I think we're going to have quite an interesting race here. Matt Daly, I'm not sure what happened there. Oh dear. I think he just went a little bit... Either he tried to avoid something down the straight and just went across the grass. That meant, of course, he couldn't stop. He also then couldn't stop for the... he couldn't stop for turn 10, and then, Paul Brady was just an innocent bystander, and that is a great shame for both, especially Paul Brady there, as they continue on just further down the running. Colin Knief, meanwhile, in P4, has been a decent race for him so far, has got Rob Whitney just ahead of him. Now, Steve Knight, Guy Swarbrick having a bit of contact, no major damage from that, though I am pleased to report. And just in case race 1 wasn't chaotic enough, lap 1 was looking like it was going to shape up to be fairly sensible. That is another big accident there, or nearly was another big accident. That was Steve Knight. That was Steve Knight and Guy Swarbrick both hanging off there, actually, as that is a big off for Guy Swarbrick once again into another barrier this time. That chassis is going to be less than happy. Come on, Guy, that chassis has got to do an entire season, not just one race. And that is down to P11 for Guy Swarbrick. On the C1 tyre now, he's deciding that the C2 not going to last long enough into the race for him, so he's going to have to go on an even harder tyre compound in order to get the racing complete, which is a bold strategy. It should maybe help him out later on, I would have thought, but even then, I think he's going to be sacrificing too much early on, and maybe we're seeing that now. He seems to be a little bit less composed than he was at the start of race 1. Meanwhile, in all of this, Alan Matthews has been leading this race, and then it is Will Inglis, just because there has been a race at the front end as well. Will Inglis is up into P2. Hopefully he doesn't have a repeat of what occurred in race 1. Rob Whitney currently running in P3, so he started in P1. He's only dropped 2 positions after all the chaos. He just needs to try and keep his head down. I'm not sure he'll be able to stay ahead of Colin Keneath for too long, but I'm sure he can at least try and trail him and maybe learn a few lines. That'll be, you know, of all the cars you could at least try and follow, that's certainly a good one. As we see him under braking there around the outside, Colin Keneath, fantastic move from him there, and into P3 for Colin Keneath. Now, Rob doesn't have to worry too much about the cars behind, at least not for now. It is Alex Smith, of course. He was lapping rather quickly indeed into the 23s for most of the race, of course, whereas Rob Whitney's currently in 24s, so I suspect in maybe about 5 laps' time we're going to see a bit of a battle going on between Alex Smith and Rob Whitney, but for now, Rob should focus, I think, on making sure the tyres are happy, making sure they're going to last well into the race. He's running on a slightly softer compound, or at least the softest that you'd really want to go on this track, and try and come home with a good haul of points. Of course, we'll look at how the points fare after race 1 in a few minutes' time, but for now, let's have a look at what else is going on track. Alan Matthews is settling into this race nice now, low 123s. That is actually his previous lap was a 23.0. He is still on that C4 tyre. He was embroiled in so many incidents towards the end of race 1. We didn't quite get to see whether or not he was able to make it work. So this is going to be still a bit experimental for him towards the end of this race. But if he can, he's in good stead here, because that's the quickest time we've seen mid-race out of anyone so far. No, we've just got a 22.9 from Colin Keneath. So Colin Keneath now we're seeing is looking a bit more like his former self as we head into that first corner. Now putting the pressure on Will Inglis as we head through turn 3 here. That long sweeping right-hander. If you nail the line, so much time can be made up here. So much time also to be lost. And of course, if you nail the line, I believe it's actually a little bit easier on the tyres if you do as well. Oh dear, big contact as we head into the 4th corner there between Colin Keneath and Will Inglis. Not sure what happened there. Not sure if drivers are just not seeing each other. Either way, Will Inglis loses a position. Colin Keneath loses not 1 but 2 positions. Actually is able to continue on up into P3 as well. I think Will Inglis forfeiting the position there, but Colin Keneath goes wide anyway. Very confusing lap here from Colin Keneath, and he actually retires from the race as well. What a shame. If he'd stayed on in both race 1 and race 2, could have been a few points on the cards there. But he does retire anyway. So then, that now leaves us with Alan Matthews in P1. Not something we were expecting, I don't think, but he did start in P1. Rob Whitney in P2, 8 seconds down on P1, with a decent margin to the car behind. So the same applies once again. He just needs to make sure he looks after the tyres, looks after the car, and he could be in good stead here in this race. There is there is Alex Smith, in fact. Now that is Paul Brady a lap down, of course, and that is a disappointing way to start his season. So it's now Alex Smith, the next car behind him. Then we have Will Inglis just behind him as well. Jack Hodson up into P5 on the C2 tyre. He had a big off, if you remember, heading into the braking zone into turn 10. He looked to be out of this race, but for all the chaos that has carried on ensuing, if you will, you know, it's perfect grammar, he's now found himself in P5 and is about 2 seconds down on Will Inglis. So a good turnaround of fortune here for Jack Hodson. Well done for you there. Now on the C2 tyre as well, he should have that bit more longevity later on into the race. As we go on board with Paul Milman. Now he's also having a decent race here up in P6, and then we have all the changes for position occurring slightly further down the running as we're still untangling a bit of the mess that occurred at the start of this race. Steve Knight now ahead of Guy Swarbrick, and those two just trading positions there. Matt Daly currently running in P11, which, you know, really wasn't expecting. He's currently running in the 23, so about, well, the 2 cars in front of him just run a 28 and a 35, so certainly closing that gap, but still not entirely ideal. I do just believe that Paul Milman's had a big off. He's been able to recover, but I can confirm, although you can see it on screen, he has no front wing at all, so that car is not going to be nice to drive in any way, shape or form. As we go on board with Alan Matthews, meanwhile, he's still lapping in the low 23s and is looking very comfortable here. So just like Alex Smith was able to do at the start of race 1, keep your nose clean and you will be rewarded for it. He is currently running in first, about 10 seconds clear of Rob Whitney, and then he's about another 6 seconds clear of Alex Smith. Jack Hodson has just got ahead of Will Inglis, actually. Jack Hodson really on a roll here. Will Inglis seemed to have a slightly slower lap, but hasn't actually gone faster at any point in this race in the 26.2. He's been embroiled in a few battles, of course, so I suspect that didn't help. Meanwhile, Jack Hodson, low 124s, currently in the 25. So he is looking primed to at least I don't think he'll be able to keep up or even catch up to Alex, but at least stay ahead of winning list as things stand. So still a decent pool of points on the cards for the racing this evening, which is what we like to see. As we see, that is now Paul. No, it's Andy Bram actually losing a couple of positions there. Not sure what happened, but either way, he is able to continue on. Either someone's being very eagle-eyed, or that's someone in the in the session. I'm not quite sure based on the username, so apologies if not. But I've just been asked rather politely in all caps to Reeve, turn your headlights off. Now I presume, because I've looked outside, well, my Beamer's got no battery at all, and then the Alfa's currently not got its headlight on, so it doesn't mean in real life, so it must mean in the game, which I am ashamed to say I have no control over whatsoever. I am using the plugins that we're using. I'm in, complete separation of the car mode. I can't adjust any parameters in the car, so that's my headlight stuck on, unfortunately. My wheel's not even plugged in, and all my headlight controls are mapped to my wheel, so even if I wanted to, I couldn't. So apologies if it is blinding anyone in the pits. My only retort would be, if you're in the pits in this race, something's gone wrong. So, yeah, apologies if I am blinding everyone, but nothing I can really do at this stage. I mean, it's an impressive battery in that little 75. Even in the off-season, if it's been sat here with its headlights sat on, although the engine is running, to be fair, maybe it's more of an impressive fuel tank. Again, as I've said many times, if you ever see that 75 listed for sale, certainly don't buy it. It's got a lot of idle hours, that engine. As we go back on board with Andy Craker now. Will Inglis actually losing a position here. This race is really... oh, it's Alex. I see. Thank you, Rosie. Yeah, that stands to reason. Yeah, thank you very much, Rosie. Of course it will be Alex complaining. Alex, big complainer, isn't he? We all... just always complaining, Alex. Will Inglis retiring from this race, unfortunately, with a very disappointing kind of middle stint of this race. He certainly had the pace. The pace seemed to drop ever so slightly as we're behind Jack Hodson, who I'm sure Rosie is rooting for in the chat there. But yeah, it's just this race weekend hasn't come together for him, and now he retires from the session. What a shame for him, because he certainly got the pace. We saw that in qualifying. Well, we saw that a bit in qualifying. We saw that in race 1, and we've seen glimpses of it in race 2 as well. Now, Guy Strawbrick and Steve Knight seem to enjoy having a bit of a collision in this race, because they've just done it once again, and there's a little bit less aero on that car once more. As we can see there, the car bouncing ever so slightly down that straight, just like a ground effect car should. See all of the wishbones fully modelled on this fantastic RSS hybrid mod there. Meanwhile, out the front end of the field, we've just eclipsed the halfway stage in this race. It's about a 15-second margin down to P2. It's like deja vu, just with a slightly different car, with a 15-second margin to Rob Whitney. Rob Whitney doing a fantastic job so far in this race, it must be said. He has been doing a stellar job, has kept the nose clean, and has been really rewarded for it. I suspect he's got to feel a little less rewarded for it now, as he, well, maybe it is rewards to enjoy a battle with Alex Smith, because it's not a position that Rob's often found himself in, and now finds himself in that position in this race. Andy Craker, meanwhile, I should mention, we knew he had great pace. He's currently in P5 once again, just as he was in race 1. Is currently setting purple sectors, and is the fastest we've seen any car go so far. At 21.7, his previous lap, absolutely flying along. That is in Raystrom, of course. As we see Alex now really putting the pressure on as we head through that third corner, that long sweeping right-hander. I suspect Alex taking that slightly wider line in order to carry a little bit more speed, get out of the dirty air as well. Not that there is too much of it, there's still some on the ground effect cars. That is great, that can carry a bit more pace for you. That does, however, put a bit more load on the tyres, if you will, and that does heat them up a little bit faster as we do cross this halfway stage of this race. Paul Millman and Andrew Brammer having a bit of contact. Paul Millman still running with completely no rear wing at all, I should mention. So well done to at least try and keep the car on the grey stuff there. Let's see how long you can keep that up, as Andrew Wright is now putting the pressure on. But let's look, and there was, seeing the bottom bit of the corner there, the rapture's occurring once again as all the grass goes flying. That's very weird, very spooky. I'm not sure what that is, but it's it's happening. We'll move on as we head now into turn 13. Upcoming next is the chicane. Rob Whitney is going to be very much on the defence here. He's good at defending, is Rob Whitney, so let's see if he can do it against the mighty Alex Smith. Race 1 winner, of course. In terms of their pace at the moment, it's a 25.2 for Rob Whitney on that last lap, into 24, and on the DRS, Alex Smith doesn't even need to wait for the braking zone. I'll try that again. Can you tell him out of practice? And heads into that first corner with a few car lengths between the two there. Fantastic move by Alex Smith. Didn't even need to think too hard about it, and well fought by Rob Whitney to keep up with it as long as he has been able to. Up next is Andy. No, apologies. That is Andy Craig. In fact, the next car behind by about 7 seconds. So I'd say Rob Whitney could be on for a good P3, P4 here if he plays his cards right, and I hope that is not the commentator's curse coming back into effect. But it's the weird grass thing again. It's going to be so confusing every time it happens. I'm sure you're nowhere near put off at home as much as I am here watching it, but it's just very weird. What could be causing that? Either way, we head now down towards turn 10, and interesting though that Paul Brady will actually benefit a little bit here from DRS, of course. He does get that even though he's a lap car. It's the same in F1. And benefits from a slipstream as well. So now we might start to see some more representative times of what Paul Brady could have done in this race. And I have some sorry news, ladies and gentlemen. It would have been quite good because he's in the low 123s. He would, in fact, be the second fastest car on track at this stage. Sorry, my maths is terrible. Third fastest car on track at this stage. Andy Craker, fastest man out of there. He's on a 121.1 on that last lap. A very fast lap indeed. And then we have, that will be Matt Daly, the next fastest, and then it would be Paul Brady. Unfortunately, he's a lap down, not too much he can do from there, not even scoring a point at this stage. As we go on board, though, speaking of Matt Daly, the battle between Matt Daly and Paul Millman was a short-lived one. It's Matt Daly up into P7. Now, we now have around about 4 or 5 laps left in this race. What can Matt Daly do in order to try and get up to P6? That's all he can really hope for, I think. He won't be able to catch up to Jack Hodson unless something goes a little bit awry for Jack. Either way, he's still got a few points at least to try and take back from race 2, which was even more of a disaster at the start than race 1 was. So Barcelona, not a happy venue for Matt Daly in the start of the 2024 season, as I have finally rightly called it, not the second half of 2023. Which, eventually I'm sure I'll get to grips with. Eventually I'll learn what I'm doing. It's only taken me a few seasons, but I'm sure I'll get there. Either way, Alan Matthews still leads this race on the C4 compound of tyre. Now, he has been able to. This is perhaps what Alex Smith was. Sorry, not Alex Smith. This is perhaps what Jack Hodson was hoping was going to happen in race 1. He's kept his nose clean and has been able to use those very soft, very grippy C4 tyres early on in this race. That means he's been able to build up a very sizable margin of about 15, 16 seconds. Now, as we go later into this race, he's going to start losing pace. In fact, he already has. 24.2 in that last lap in comparison to Alex Smith, our previous race winner, 23.4. So, certainly a pace delta there, and that will only increase as we go later into this race in the final few laps here. But will that margin be enough? Well, I think mathematically it would work out if he's able to keep it on the track. We saw Jack Hodson, the car just became completely undrivable late on, and well, let's hope for Alan Matthews' sake, at least, that doesn't happen in this race. For Alex Smith's sake, as I was clearly attempting to say just then, I'm sure he's hoping that will happen because a 15-second margin is pretty insurmountable, despite the pace delta. But yeah, the C4 and the C2 tyre is going to be certainly an interesting strategic call by Alan Matthews there. It's worked out for him so far, it must be said. Just will it work later on? Meanwhile, the C3 is, not that I know what I'm talking about at all. The C3 would be the tyre that I'd go for, I think, at this track. It's got the right mix. But then again, because I'm, not that well informed, I'd probably say the medium, the middle one is probably what you want to go for at every track. Because, although I say that again, my driving style, I'd probably go for a harder compounded tyre. Either way, what was my record? I'm sure, I think, was it Le Mans? It was either Le Mans or Sebring. No, it wasn't. It was Portimao. It was Portimao, 170 degrees. I got the front left to through the final corner. That was, I'm not quite sure how that maintained pressure. Either way, the car survived the race, especially with my driving, and I've lived to tell the tale. So now we get ready for another fantastic season here. And if this is anything to go by, if this first race has been anything to go by, we're going to be fairly action-packed. I can confirm that my voice is already dead. It's already completely and utterly knackered. I've been out of practice now for a good 5 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks, and I'm suffering the consequences of that. Combined with a very action-packed set of races here, my voice is very much giving up. But luckily that will be all resolved. Now it's saying Alex Smith is in the lead here. I believe that is just a timing error. It is in fact a timing error. Alex Smith is still heading through turn 11, turn 12 as we speak. We're on board with him now. But he is very much hunting him down, it must be said. That gap now stands at only 8 seconds. So 5 minutes ago, it's looking less and less comfortable by the second here for Alan Matthews. He heads now through that first corner. Not too far behind at all is Alex Smith. You can follow along, of course, by going to AROC2.emperorservers.com and you can see what is going on in terms of time, where everyone is on track and what their best laps, their tyre compounds, their last laps, everything that you need to know information-wise with this race. But speaking of some information, let's have a look at how the championship is forming up after that first race of this season. Of course, not too much really to make any predictions on so far, but still interesting nonetheless. And they've changed the way that they do it, so I can no longer look at the points scoring mid-weekend, which is probably for the best in terms of drop scores and everything like that, but still won't be able to get you that info so far. But actually, Alan Matthews must be starting to build up the gap to Alex Smith. Not sure if Alex Smith had a bit of a slow lap there. We'll find out towards the end of this one. Through the first 2 sectors, he certainly looked competitive. In fact, looked faster than Alan Matthews even. So I suspect heading into this final sector, it was a bit of a slower run there for Alex Smith. We'll find out in just a moment's time there as Alan Matthews crosses the line once more into the 26s now. Those tyres are completely past their best, if you will. And Alex Smith into the 23s there, so also not his fastest, but very close to it must be said. Only 0.3 off his fastest outright. So yeah, I'm not sure what that kind of drop-off in performance was. It looks to be, though, Alan Matthews, after that lap, is potentially a little bit safer than he otherwise was, which I'm sure he is somewhat relieved with. Meanwhile, Andy Craker has been able to catch up substantially, as we see now. Very close, actually, to Alex Smith. So I think Alex Smith is going to be much more focused on what is going on just behind him instead of the battle for P1 here. Still a good result here from Alex Smith, P1 and P2, if it stays this way. But with half a second between them, you have to say the pressure very much now on Alex Smith. 1:22.1 on that last lap for Andy Craker. So still rather competitive, about a second separating these two cars in terms of their pace at the moment, as we head now down that long start-finish straight once again. Of course, we've picked Barcelona because it's the kind of genesis of all the Formula One seasons. Of course, it's not quite at the start of the season in the actual season, but it is where testing occurs, and testing we get to look forward to in a couple of months' time for the 2024 F1 season. We're already running at this track now, so it's a good mix, this track, of high-speed corners, low-speed corners, and it's a really good test overall of a car, and we're starting to see those drivers negotiate that now with 0.6 of a second separating these to make that 0.5 of a second. Andy Craig is still very much hot on his heels, and as we head towards that third and final sector now. One of the most crucial part of the laps coming up here, turn 9. You can make or break your lap, and the midway through sector 2, you can make or break your lap at the start of sector 3. There's plenty of places where you can just bleed off time at this track. It's from a driver point of view. I know it hasn't in the past, especially this layout, hasn't led to the most exhilarating races of all time. But from a driver point of view, it's a brilliant track to drive, I think. It's such a technical challenge, and you know, all of the changing of elevation, changing cambers. It's a great circuit to drive. Andy Craker has dropped off by about a second now. Meanwhile, Rob Whitney is up into P4. Just got ahead of Jack Hodson there. Jack Hodson on that harder compounder tyre. Certainly looking to score more points than he did in race 1. Maybe not the dizzying heights that he was perhaps hoping, but certainly the right call was made there in terms of tyre strategy for his sake at least. Because look at the gap now between Alex Smith and Alan Matthews. It is going to come down to the wire, ladies and gentlemen. We are 30 seconds away from the timer hitting 0. Alan Matthews is currently just heading through turn 5, so this will in fact be the penultimate lap of this race. As we see Matt Daly up into P4 there. What's happened to... in fact, no, ignore me there, just a timing error. But this is going to be so close now between these two cars. On that last lap, Alan Matthews in the 26 is still Alex Smith with a blistering 22.7. Wasn't quite expecting that one. Not quite the heights of the 21 that we saw from Matt Daly or Andy Craig, but still impressive nonetheless. And now only 1.5 seconds separate Alan Matthews and Alex Smith. This is really down to the wire for Alex Smith and Alan Matthews. Now, of course, Alex Smith can't think too much about what's going on just in front of him because there's Andy Craker just behind. Speaking of just behind, it's Rob Whitney and Jack Hodson as well. They've got a very exciting battle forming up for P4 here. Both on the DRS system. One of the prime overtaking spots now, turn 10. Jack Hodson has a look at going around the outside. Can he make it stick? No, well defended by Rob Whitney there as we start what is now the final lap of this race with our two cars battling for the lead. As we head into that first corner, Alex Smith's going to try and make it go round the outside the long way around, and did that work? I think it did, ladies and gentlemen, because he's been able to box him off and stop the switchback from happening there. Heading into turn 3, it's Alex Smith into the lead of this race once again, and now we see Alan Matthews under pressure from Andy Craig as we head now into turn 4 up the inside. Andy Craig says thank you very much, and into P2. A fantastic move by Andy Craig as well. There is Alan Matthews losing out big time with that tyre compound just really falling off a cliff now at this stage in the race. A very disappointing end to the race for him, but still P3 on the cards here, and I say on the cards, it's a 25 second margin down to P4. So I think Alan Matthews will have to sit in disappointment with P3, but at least it will be a spot on the podium. Meanwhile, Alex Smith, it's not over yet for him, and hopefully no desperate moves as we now approach the final couple of opportunities for an overtake for the lead of this race. Who knew it would come down to the wire when you considered how big the margin was just a few laps ago? But it is Alex Smith trying to defend his race-winning title, if you will, from the race 1 as we head now into the end of this second race. Through the chicane with ease, has kept Andy Craig at bay. Just one final corner to go, back on the throttle, and it will be Alex Smith taking the race 2 victory. It has been a great weekend for him. Race 1 and race 2 go to him. Andy Craig comes home with P2. Great recovery for him. And then we have Alan Matthews with P3 in the end. Now we look at the battle between Jack Hodson and Rob Whitney. It's no longer a battle between Jack Hodson and Rob Whitney. It's a battle between Jack Hodson and Matt Daly. So here is Rob Whitney headed through that chicane for one final time in the RSS Hybrid. A fantastic looking, all-powerful, almighty car here as we get back onto the start-finish straight. Rob Whitney crosses in P4, Jack Hodson P5, Matt Daly oh so close behind on another great recovery drive for him actually in P6 in the end. A fantastic drive for a few cars here in race 2. Andrew Brammer, a nice, quiet and confident race, comes home with P7, decent haul of points there. Then we have Paul Milne will be coming home with P8 in a few moments' time. That was certainly very much on the it was borderline really for Alex Smith there. Who could have thought just when you consider only 5 or 6, maybe 7 laps ago, that margin was comfortably 15-20 seconds. He has been able to close it up though, and close it up he did to take the race victory. Of course, Alan Matthews settling in the end for P3, but not without any kind of difficulty from Andy Craig though. A great recovery, shows us the pace that he demonstrated in qualifying. He wasn't able to show it in race 1. He had a bit of a disaster at the start, but has recovered well to take P2 in the end. And then we have Paul Milne the crossing line in P8. Steve Knight comes home P9, some points on the board for him. Likewise for Guy Swarbrick. Then we have Paul Brady coming home P11, a lap down unfortunately. Then we have William Gliss and Colin Keefe unfortunately retiring from this race. So not the start to the season that those two would have wanted, but an ideal start for a few other drivers. As we have Alex Smith. Are my headlights on enough for you now? As he is donutting around me in the pit lane there. All I can see is a pillar. Can I... There we are. There's Alex. That's not my head. My headlights aren't on. My hazards are on, which is it's an Alfa 75. That's a standard factory feature. But yeah, there's no headlights here as Alex Smith celebrates 2 race victories. What a way to start his season, and hopefully for his sake it continues on like that. Do we have any more victory? We've got a victory parade lap, I think, coming to an end for Rob. Wait as Alex Smith continues crashing into me. This car is pristine. It's 0 miles, 12,000 engine hours, and the bodywork's being ruined by Alex Smith. That is very impolite of him. Matt Daly donating at chicane there to celebrate the end of this race weekend. Andrew Brammer completely finishing his tyres off. And we have Steve Knight coming to a quiet stop at the end of the track there. I'm surprised that car's still drivable for Matt Daly, but it appears to be. And then we have the end of this race weekend. So I hope you've enjoyed watching as much as I've enjoyed commentating. And we'll catch you in a fortnight's time for round 2. And of course, next week for the first round of the Touring Car Championship. So, I'll see you then. Thank you very much for watching.